Hi, welcome. My name is Meghan O'Rourke. I'm here at CCTV, Town Meeting Television, and I am pleased to be joined by our State Auditor, Doug Hoffer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
So we have met in the last, I think it was about a year and a half ago that we last met, and we're going to do a 2026 year in review plus. What has the auditor's office been up to?
Well, we'll have to do that much in a lightning round.
Yeah, okay. You have a lot of, so the auditor's office, give us a brief overview.
That's a good point. Yeah. Not everybody knows. They may think we have green eye shades and do nothing but, that sort of auditing, old-fashioned financial auditing, and we don't.
Yeah.
That is very important and has to be done every year because Wall Street insists on it and because it's good practice. But we hire a firm to do the audits of the state's financial statements and the so-called federal single audit, which is compliance.
Your office hires that firm and oversees them?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
But that leaves us free to do performance auditing, which is very important and allows us to ask and answer the questions on a variety of programs. The legislature created this program and they fund it with your tax money. Is it achieving the goals intended by the legislature? And some of it's nuts and bolts stuff about how government runs, which is very important, and some of it's programmatic. Is it, what are the outcomes, which is hard to measure sometimes, but we do the best we can. So I like the work. It's not entirely about policy, but that's a big piece.
And you're in the paper, the auditor's office is in the paper right now for the most recent sheriff's report findings. So that's been getting a lot of attention. So let's just kind of work backwards from there.
Sure.
What did the sheriff's report find, and what has to happen?
I don't think it's a surprise to people who pay attention a little bit to the news that a number of sheriffs around the state over the last 5 or 10 years have, acted inappropriately on occasion, or have been alleged to have acted inappropriately.
We found 6 arrests or something.
Something like that. And it's unfortunate, but that leads to questions about, as was the case in Franklin County a number of years back, when our audit firm that we hired was doing the biennial audit, and they hit a wall. They said, there's some problems with this information, we can't continue. That's what auditors do, they stop, and they can't opine clearly about it. So as it turned out, the legislature was concerned about this individual, that earlier acting and then elected sheriff, and tried to impeach him. And from the House, and they couldn't get the votes, which was interesting. But that led to a lot of people saying, well, how do you get rid of somebody who is perceived to be a problem? And the answer is you don't, other than impeachment. I mean, that person can choose not to run for re-election, they can run and lose, or they can be impeached, and that's it. And that's one of the reasons we did the report, not only to collect information in a summary fashion, which it comes out in bits and pieces, but to address this question in the end, largely for the legislature. We looked at all 50 states, all the other 49 states, said how do they deal with accountability, ultimate accountability for sheriffs? And it varies around the country, but there are models that we can learn from. But interestingly, the barrier for action in the legislature is that sheriffs are in the Constitution, like my office. And you can't just change fundamental stuff about them with a law. You have to do it with a constitutional amendment. On the other hand, I think there are some things at the margins that they could do. So we gave them all that information, and I think that will help the discourse advance a little bit, because they stalled the last time.
Your job is to give them the information they need to make their own decisions, you didn't give them a prescription way
No, not
forward.
in this case, no.
Got it.
And also, to finish with the sheriffs real quick, a number of the problems over time have been financial.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's rare indeed that a sheriff, that a candidate runs for sheriff and touts his or her financial experience. I've run a small business. Have you? That's good, because that's what sheriff's departments are, small businesses. But they never do that.
Yeah.
They just run for sheriff and say, I can do it, law and order, whatever. But a lot of the problems are because they don't know how to run a small business.
Why did this get so much attention?
They wear uniforms, they carry guns, they're often well respected in their communities. A lot of them are. I mean, I've met a bunch of them over the years, and a lot of them do great work, and some of them don't. And there's something not appealing, but interesting in people in uniforms getting caught doing bad things.
Got it. So that was a report that you issued. There was also a couple of other things. Do you want to take us through what you feel were the highlights, and then I'll see if you cover the things that I have questions about?
Oh, sure. I can do this quickly.
Excellent.
We were sitting around one day, and I thought about the fact that the state itself has a number of entities that serve consumers in a way that isn't common for state government. And they respond to consumer complaints. And I thought, I wonder how well they're doing, because we had never done that. So we picked 3 that have the largest number of complaints to handle and did the work. And one was the Department of Health, which looks at restaurants and lodging places. They inspect them for safety. Another was the Department of Financial Regulation, the insurance division, because people are always complaining about insurance companies. No offense. Well, maybe some. And then the other was the Department of Public Service, which is responsible for working with regulated utilities. They're not the Public Utility Commission, but they're a department, and they have these responsibilities. And all 3, you could say some good things about. They work hard. They have a substantial workload, but all 3 are a little slow on getting the work done. None of them, they've all set goals as to how quickly they'd like to resolve all these cases, but none of them meet the goals. And in one case, the Department of Health wasn't very good about getting back to the places where they found problems to see if the corrective actions had been corrected. So it was interesting, and they were all cooperative and helpful. They weren't accustomed to being in the spotlight, for sure.
So you gave this information back to the agencies. Did you see any changes from
It's interesting you say that, because what we do with all of our audits, and that's required by our professional standards manual, is to not only allow the auditee to submit written comments to us, which we include in the report, and then sometimes we respond to elements of that. The other is that a year after the report is issued, we go back and do what's called a recommendation follow-up. We want to see if they've adopted our recommendations, and then we do it 2 years after that, so it's after 1 and 3 years, and the numbers are pretty good. Usually about 50% within a year, and 75% or more out over 3 years. Some of it's money. If they have to get a new IT system, that's got to be in the budget. Maybe there's other priorities, whatever. But yeah, we follow up to see if they do it.
And was the child care oversight part of that?
No, the child care was a separate audit.
Because that had there's some similar findings there where...
A little bit, but the takeaways on that one were a little bit different. And the problem in that area, as you and others may know, is that there's a challenge in finding child care workers. And they don't pay that well. It's better than it used to be, and there's training, and there's been a lot of movement on child care. But in order to work in a child care facility, you have to have your background checked by the FBI and by a state system with fingerprinting and all this stuff, which is absolutely appropriate. However, the state is not doing a very good job. They're way behind. I mean, it's not uncommon that it takes 90 days to get those 2 checks done. That's for somebody who came to you and said, I want to work for you. And you say, great, you look great. Let's start. Oh, no, we can't start tomorrow.
3 months from now.
That's ridiculous. So that was a takeaway on that one, which is too bad. But otherwise, people in the department, the development, the child care group, they're working hard. They're doing what they can, but they need to solve this problem big time.
So are folks bringing this, like if, in this case, if they need to hire more folks in the fingerprint checking business, is this stuff that they're going to take back to the legislature and look for budget allocations, or how do you find the fix?
Well, it's interesting because all of these agencies and departments are part of the executive branch, which is headed by the governor, whoever that governor is at any given time. And the budget is, the massive budget is submitted to the legislature on behalf of the governor as one document.
Yeah.
And the governor's office and all of his or her close advisors have to sign off on all the big stuff. And if somebody says in their department to their boss, we could really use another $2 million next year for so-and-so, or $2 million every year for the next indefinitely for so-and-so. Well, that is probably true all throughout state government.
Sure.
But maybe the boss has said, there's no more money.
Yeah.
I don't want to raise taxes. Sound familiar? And without more revenue, we can't give you what you need. I might sympathize with you, but there's no more money. So we routinely ask the people that we interview for these audit jobs, did you ask for more money? And it's awkward for them because they don't want to say, I asked the governor and he said no. And I don't know that that's always what happened. It might be that they've internalized this and they know, I can't ask for money. I have to do with what I have.
Now, does it make a difference that this is a partisan political office and that you...
Mine is not a partisan office at all. You must run as a Democrat or Republican or a progressive, but the work is not partisan at all.
Sure, but you're a Democrat. And
Well, I run as a Democrat and a progressive, but the work is nothing. The work is pure evidence-based findings, period.
I
No,
understand that, but do
interestingly,
you think the governor responds to it in
I think
that
all
way,
of state government respects the
That's
work we do.
okay.
That's the good news.
Yeah. Keep going down the audits. You're going to hold it. That was, I pushed a button there. Sorry about
We had another one at the Department of Buildings and General Services, which has a lot of responsibilities, and we've audited aspects of their portfolio many times over the years. This one was something we did a few years ago, and I wanted to revisit. The legislature about 20 years ago said, you know, we're talking a lot about energy efficiency and reducing use to save money and protect the environment. We got to walk the walk with state government. So they created a couple of programs, you know, revolving loan funds and so forth, to allow the state to make investments to achieve those kinds of energy efficiency savings. And the question was, how you doing? And when we did it 5 years ago, they weren't doing very well. They had started years back with the low-hanging fruit, the stuff
When you
that's
say
easy.
years, what does that mean?
When the program started, it was over 20 years ago.
Okay.
So that was easy back then. Low-hanging fruit was, well, we know you can save a lot of money with doing lighting,
Yeah.
you know, very efficient lighting. So they did the low-hanging fruit, and that was that. But then they kind of lost interest. So I kind of had a feeling about that. And they don't audit, but they get Efficiency Vermont to audit various buildings and tell them, we think you could save X if you invest Y, whatever. Well, as it turns out, the amount of money being spent for efficiency improvements has declined dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years. It's another money issue. And
So, but what other measures are you using besides the decline in spending? Because couldn't spending drop off because there's no more
no.
efficiency to do, or?
If that were true, we would have said so, but that's not true.
Okay.
There's lots of opportunities for additional savings. The Efficiency Vermont audits, they sometimes hire outsiders to help them. They bring them back to BGS and say, here's what we found.
Yeah.
If you do these things, you will save this much money.
So you're looking at I guess that's the question is, like, what other partners do you rely on in the state to help you find the information that you need?
We don't have to rely on partners.
You don't.
By law, if you are the head of a program
Okay.
or department and we say, hi, we're here to help.
Yeah.
We're here to do an audit. Don't be upset. It'll be fine. We're not going to kick your dog. We need the following documents. You are required by law to provide those documents, period.
So you're not relying on partners. You're looking at the materials that they've gleaned in their
Yes,
work.
exactly.
Yeah.
There are times when managers see us coming and say, this is great, because we've had trouble getting the attention of I don't mean to pick on Phil Scott, the governor's office or somebody else, the head of our agency, we are in a department with it. And if you come with an audit report that says we need more resources for 3 or 4 things, then that helps us make the case.
Yeah.
Not all of them say that, but some do.
Yeah. Shall we keep? Yeah.
So yeah, the energy one was disappointing and continues to be. Let's see, what do we got? DEVA. Have you ever heard of something called the Blueprint? About 15 years ago.
Blueprint to Care?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, the Agency of Human Services and some, thoughtful, smart people said, we can help primary care providers by giving them the resources to do some things to raise the bar for them. One of them was IT related, sharing information. Remember years ago when we talked about it should be easier for doctors to share information because it was paper, for God's sake. So they did that, not always as well as they could have, I might add, by a different organization, and training and a number of related issues. So the question then is, the point of that was to help those providers provide better care and save money. Okay, how you doing? Have you saved money? Are you providing better care? And the answer was they had no idea. They take their role as a pass-through for money very seriously because they still provide money, subsidies in a way, to a bunch of primary care providers, and it's not insignificant. It's like $20 million a year or more. But they're not doing the job of measuring or trying to measure, and it's not easy because if you're talking about have healthcare outcomes improved in the last 15 years, there are so many things that contribute to that are causal. So it's very hard to do that. As for the dollars, that shouldn't be quite as hard, but they weren't. And we kind of tussled with them, but in the end, I think they understood, and we've already done a recommendation follow-up, and they've made some progress.
And what were the recommendations?
Well, first they needed a strategic plan. They didn't have one, and they're required to have one by statute. And that's the beginning of all this stuff about measuring performance starts with a plan. Because you say, these are our goals, these are our objectives, this is what we want to achieve. And then you can measure those. If you don't have a plan, what are you measuring?
It's
Nothing.
hard to measure results.
It can be.
It is hard to
Yeah.
measure results, especially when there are factors that are outside your control. And I know the state had passed the results-based accountability, budgeting, and that sort of.
That was a mess and didn't work at all.
Yeah.
No, and that's disappeared. It's been 3 or 4 years. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have a job going on right now on performance measurement in state government. And they absolutely need to get back to that. Not just, that was the legislature. And they have a role to play, absolutely. What happened is that the administration, I think it might have been before Phil, I don't know if it was Shumlin, but it might have been Phil Scott. They produce a report every year. And this leads me to one, you'll love this.
Okay.
They produce a report every year that every department and agency is required to submit a handful or more measures. Some are just outputs. How many widgets did you make?
Yeah.
We don't make things, it's mostly services,
Sure,
but
yeah.
you know, how many things did
How
you
many
do?
kids did you feed lunch?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And are they better off for that? How do you measure that? So that's what they're required to do. Interestingly, the legislature would like to do more, but they can't quite figure out how. And they don't want to ask taxpayers for more money to do that. There are some limitations to what's going on in the administration, which does this thing every year. And one of them is this. I was curious, as you may know from talking to me before, I've been dealing with economic development issues for many, many years.
Yeah.
Long before I had this job.
CETO office. Yeah.
And so I was curious about the performance measures reported by the Department of Economic Development, which is within the Agency of Commerce. And I picked 6 programs, and I wanted to take a close look at them. And some of them, you know, have embedded problems, like Veggie.
Yeah.
We'll get to that as well. It's an incentive program for business, and it's very subjective. They come in and say, if you give us the money, we're going to create 27 jobs. Well, how do you know you wouldn't have created them anyway? So how can you report that as a certain growth in jobs as a certainty? You don't know that. So Veggie's a problem. TIF is a problem. But there were 2 programs in the Department of Economic Development that reported some information to this massive administration-wide thing. So I contacted them. I said, you know, how do you ensure the reliability of this data? And they said, well, in this case, we really don't collect the data. We just use information from their applications. These are people seeking grants. Oh, that was kind of my response. Do you remember in The Exorcist when the kid's head spun around?
Yeah.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah.
Then that's not really an outcome, is it?
It's a hope.
It's a hope, yes.
Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah.
nice? It's a hope.
Yeah.
So
I read
this-
the dating profile. He said he wanted to get married. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So there are some odd things going on in performance measurement, and the audit that we're doing is the first of a 2-parter, and it's fascinating, and both should be done before I leave because I care a lot about this. So
Is that information, or how does the public see those reporting measures?
they're on our website, and we do.
And the governor's collecting them. Is it on the?
The governor, as far as I know, doesn't have anybody saying, have you gotten anything from Doug today?
Okay.
Pretty sure they don't do that.
Okay.
However, all the people who receive these reports,
But this DED performance reporting is
that went to them.
is supposed to go to the governor's office.
Well, it's
And
interesting
then do
you
they
ask.
collect that
It's interesting
somewhere
you
for
ask.
the public to review?
No, it's on my website.
Okay.
Mine, our website, the state auditor's
The state
website.
auditor's website.
You would hope that the people who run the departments that house all these programs would appreciate the value of this work and put it on their own websites. Hey, look what the auditor said about our work. We can do better. They don't generally do that. They don't want to advertise that the auditor found problems. But my website has all of this stuff. And furthermore, by law, we are required to send it to the governor, to the speaker, to the Senate pro tem, to the Commissioner of Finance and Management, and some other folks. And I always add the people who are the commissioners and secretaries of the agencies and departments. Furthermore, we have something called, I don't know what it's called, Monkey something or other, which is a way to send information and emails and attachments to large numbers of people with the click of a. And we send those reports, all these reports, audits and regular reports, to every member of the legislature, particularly the people who are in the committees of jurisdiction that deal with these issues. Furthermore, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was very disappointed in the for lack of a better phrase, the mainstream media's lack of what I would call robust coverage of our work.
Yeah.
So I went to a friend who was a politician and said, I know you have distribution lists, and they have a lot of names on them. Could I use that? And I had used it in a campaign, and he said, well, it's not up to me, because you bought that from me. So I went to the Attorney General's office, and I said, I'd like to transfer this from my personal property to the office. And they said, you can use it to talk about auditor job work, but you can never again use it for a campaign. I said, fine with me. I don't need it for a campaign.
Yeah.
So, and it had about 14,000 names on it. And so every time one of these comes out, it gets out. You obviously are not on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it. Good. Okay.
I've got it. Right. Which brings me to the question of, probably, when data started becoming the new
Right.
Jesus,
Yeah.
right? And that was I'm sorry for saying that, but, open data was so important.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have data brokers and data sales and
AI
how
and
does
all that
that
stuff.
Yeah, and AI, how does that affect your decisions around transparency and openness and making data sets available to the public, and then who else knows?
A couple of things. First of all, we don't use AI. The whole point of auditing is to make sure you get evidence. And evidence doesn't mean what somebody got from AI because they asked a question about their department or their program. I want old-fashioned school stuff, a piece of paper, or an electronic version of a piece of paper that we can track its source, exactly where it came from and who created it, and is the data reliable. That's what we do. That's what auditing is. So I suppose you could use AI early in the planning process for an audit and ask it questions and see if something comes up that you hadn't thought of. But as far as the work papers that support these reports, they are real. They are not any of the stuff.
And you don't have concerns about making all of this information publicly
no,
available?
Of course not. No.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm troubled when parts of state government don't make their material public. There aren't many of those, but one of them is VEPSI. Their decisions.
You got to say what VEPSI is.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Economic Progress Council, which is 11 people, 9 of whom were appointed by the governor. They're not elected, and they make decisions that now are over $100 million in the last 20 years. And their work is confidential. Even the legislature can't see it. I can see it, but I can't report any names, which is kind of sad.
Why? Why is that? Why is that?
That was a
behind
decision the legislature agreed to when they created the program, because their feeling was, well, if we name names, people won't come to ask for money from the program. So, what's the problem?
Yeah.
They're asking for a subsidy. Shouldn't they be open to saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
We're trying to do more for your community, create more jobs, whatever it is. We're proud of doing that.
Yeah.
We just like a few bucks, whatever it is, but they won't.
Yeah. Tell us some more about some of the findings. I see Medicaid is up.
The Medicaid one was interesting. We've done Medicaid from different angles many times over the years. This one, we looked at what's called the Program Integrity Unit. I think now it's called the Special Investigations Unit, but Medicaid, federal, well, it's half federal, half state. It's a lot of money, $2 billion a year. It's a great deal of money.
And remind us that in the context of the whole state budget.
State budget up to about $8 billion.
Yeah, so that's
a lot.
Quarter of the budget right there. Yeah, okay.
So the federal government requires that all the states that run Medicaid programs do what we do, which is have a program integrity unit that's looking for fraud, waste, and abuse actively. They don't just wait around until somebody calls them with a whistleblower complaint. They're in the game. And it's not surprising that with so much money sloshing around, $2 billion, that you're going to find some people who will look to take advantage of a system that's immensely complex and has points along the way that would allow you to maybe shade something a little bit. Have you ever heard of upcoding in medicine?
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
You go to see a doctor and he or she says, you need this following 3 things. Well, maybe you only needed 1.
Yeah.
Maybe the answer to the first one would have saved them and you the trouble and money of doing the other 2 tests or whatever they may be. Upcoding is the source of a lot of fraud. So what the Program Integrity Unit does is inform their superiors about risk that they've identified so they can change policies and also say, we think those guys stole $500,000. And then the guys...
Has that happened? Have we found...
All the time.
Okay.
Now,
and what happens?
luckily, here's a
good
good story.
We're not hearing about that all the time?
The good answer is, not as to why we don't hear about it, but one of the reasons is it's not as much as you would think as a percentage of the $2 billion.
Got it.
The period we looked at, we found that they had identified 1.5 million in fraudulently collected funds.
In a year?
I think it was 2 years.
2 years, wow.
And about $500,000 of it couldn't be collected for a variety of reasons. So they're on the job. What we found is that their superiors on some occasions don't follow their advice as to how to close risk opportunities. And here's a fun one, people will love this. They found that a practice, I won't say what part of the state it was in, of primary care providers, had in fact overbilled like $500,000. And they recommended recovery to their bosses, and their bosses said, okay, we can do that. So they got the money back, then they gave it back to them.
Because they were going to go under.
I think, typically we don't look at intent, but I think that's what they were thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm sympathetic, but how do you punish people who take advantage of the system and cheat if you don't make it hurt?
Yeah.
So.
That sounds like there's a more to the story there.
Oh, there's a lot.
But for the sake of brevity, we're going to move on.
Okay. Where would you like to move to?
Well, have
New
we
Jersey?
covered? Yeah. Have we covered sort of the highlights that you wanted to bring up over the last year?
Oh, you
and a
said
half?
you had some. If you want to ask me a question.
I think you covered them. I had the child care audit, oversight audit, the state energy audit, and the sheriff's report. But
Okay.
You have so much more here.
Had I mentioned, well, there's one that we just completed recently that was something I wanted to do before I left, because I realized that over time there are some common themes in these audit reports in terms of the findings. What kinds of problems percolate up in more than one department? Because we don't have findings just about programmatic stuff. They're about how you do business. And we provide services for the most part in state government. So I asked some staff, and it was tedious because they had to read all the old audit reports again. But some things did bubble up, and they're mostly in the category called internal controls, which are organizational tools to avoid fraud, waste, and abuse, and to be more efficient and effective. And if you write them down and train your staff properly, you can save a lot of grief, not just from auditors, but for taxpayers and for delivering better and more effective services. So some of the things that came up were just about process.
And is there somebody that's adopted that you could give an example of?
I can give you some examples.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good one, although nothing's changed. Back to the Agency of Commerce and the Department of Economic Development. We did a job a couple of years ago where they had a program. It wasn't like VEGI, which is about job creation, technically, but they came up with a need that they said was unmet, that I hadn't seen any evidence for, but nevertheless they convinced the legislature, who gave them $10 million. Capital investment by private companies, which is, you can't avoid it. If you're in business and you have competition, and they found equipment that's more efficient than what you're using, their productivity is going to go up. And if you don't do the same thing, then you're falling behind. It's not just that, but it's training, it's all kinds of things. So, capital investment. So they had the program, and the legislature, to its credit, said, if you're going to do this kind of work, we want to know, take it a step beyond VEGI and the other incentive programs, what evidence is there that this is a good deal for the state? And what the economist, Tom Kabat, and his partner do for things like this is say, well, we know that if in fact they make these investments, capital investments, and maybe they get a little more in payroll and so forth, we can predict using the econometric models what that means to the state. We'll get a little more revenue, tax revenue of one kind or another, and that's a good thing. We can measure that. And there's some costs related. We can measure that too. So we think, reviewing the proposal, that it's likely to produce a benefit of $300,000. But they came to the agency and said, we need $1 million. And the agency said, well, that's what they need, because that's what they told us. Oh.
Yeah.
So the legislature was successful in getting them the tools they needed to do the review in advance of the award. Well, a few months later, the governor got the legislature to give them another $40 million to extend this program.
Yeah.
But they went to the legislature and said, we don't want to bother with that net fiscal impact thing anymore. It's burdensome, it takes too long, we don't need it. And the legislature said, okay. When in fact, there is an internal control guideline put out by the Department of Finance and Management that says, state a lot of the times is in the business of giving away grant money. You need to be certain that they are eligible. And in this case, the eligibility included a promise. That's what I need. That's not evidence.
How long have you been doing this job?
Oh, a while, almost 14 years.
14 years. Yeah. And it wouldn't be fair not to say that you're retiring at the end of in about 6 months. You'll be done, and there'll be an election in November for a new auditor.
Correct.
In the 14 years that you've been doing this job, and really in your whole career of kind of looking at the metrics that, I mean, it's the metrics that drive us to be who we are and where we are are not allowed to be humans, right? I mean,
Right.
What do you think is the root? What's at the root? And if you could, wave your magic wand on your way out the door, what would you change? What would you implement to be able to solve some of this stuff from the get-go?
Given that our core mission is transparency and accountability, performance measurement, honest, objective, robust performance measurement is critical, and we don't do a very good job. And part of it is that it's extra work, and as you acknowledged before, it's sometimes difficult. Okay, it's not your money, it's their money. They have a right to expect state government to do the best it can and not waste money. And if there's a program that is giving away money for reasons that pass judgment, then you're wasting taxpayer money. You want to achieve something, that's good, maybe, but there are also priorities. There's only so much money, in truth. It's not endless. Are we running out of time?
No.
Oh. So anyway, to your question, I would say much more attention to performance measurement, and the 2 reports that will be coming out before I leave will hopefully do that. The legislature is overworked and under-resourced. They have the Joint Fiscal Office.
Isn't everybody overworked and under-resourced? I mean, you said do we have enough to go around to serve our communities in the fundamental end? And the question that keeps coming back as I'm doing these conversations with folks or with you is revenue.
Well, I think there's plenty of revenue. I think there's a lot of it that is misplaced. If we had good performance measures, we could answer the question, is your program actually achieving what we need? And if the answer is kind of and not fully, then the question is not, give me more money because I had this much last year, this year I want more. It's, why should we do that at all? Is there a better way to achieve those ends? Do we know what they are? What are other states doing? There isn't enough talk about what's happening elsewhere in this state. But back to my point, the Joint Fiscal Office is too small for the job. There are analysts who work for the money committees, appropriations, finance and ways and means and so forth. But all the other committees, like Commerce, that deals with the Agency of Commerce and Department of Economic Development, if those guys come in on behalf of the governor, any governor, not just this one, and say, we've got these new programs we'd like to fund, what do you think? Well, the people at the table sometimes don't even know what questions to ask. They're busy, they're overworked. What they should be able to do is say, let's call Kevin, he's our guy, and get him to do some analysis. Because what we do is look backwards, Kevin can look forward. And say, well, I know that other states do this, and this has been their experience, and inform the discourse. The discourse is not always informed. Now, there are issue areas where there are both sides of a debate are represented, but some there aren't. You get lobbyists, or you get the administration, and that's it.
And so many legislators rely on lobbyists to tell them.
Well, because they're under-resourced.
So you mentioned one audit that you hope to finish up. Is there anything that, what's burning a hole
Performance
in your pocket?
measurement, for sure.
Okay. Performance measurement. Do you support an Office of Accountability?
Well, that's what we are.
Committee, or an
The legislature
committee in the legislature?
They've had these conversations. They're trying to figure out what's the best model. I'm not sure that, to me, the best approach is one committee. It's not bad, but that means that everybody else is going to say, it's not my job, it's that committee's job.
You want it baked into the...
Here's what I consider a problem. The committees of jurisdiction view themselves as policy committees, and that's a big part of their responsibility. But I think they should also devote some of their time to the nuts and bolts, the operational side of the
procedures.
Yes, because if they did that, then they'd care more about performance measurement. I think everybody should care about performance measurement. All the people should be trained on it. You know, when you come into the legislature, you get some training. They don't train on performance measurement at all.
Doug, Auditor, thank you for this brief overview of a year and a half, and thank you for your service as auditor.
Well, thank you. You guys do great work.
We try. Thank you for watching, and be well.